Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we tackle a single relevant question based on our Bible reading for that day. This week our reading is centered around the book of 1 Peter. Today I'm joined by Sheryl Daughety and Chris Rexroad, and we're going to look at a question from 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 11 through 25. And he says, Dear friends, I warn you as temporary residents and foreigners to keep away from worldly desires that wage war against your very souls. Be careful to live properly among unbelieving neighbors. Then, even if they accuse you of doing wrong, they will see your honorable behavior, and they will give honor to God when He judges the world. For the Lord's sake, submit to all human authority, whether the king as head of state or the officials he has appointed. For the king has sent them to punish those who do wrong and honor those who do right. He says, be careful to live properly among your unbelieving neighbors. So the question I have is, how does our everyday life influence unbelievers around us? And then I have another question I want to follow up with, but how does our everyday life influence the people who are around us, particularly unbelievers?
I think a lot of the unbelievers, they know what the expectations are for Christians and how we should live, how we should treat people. So basically, it's, are you walking your talk? And then it pours into how you're treating them as a person as well, and that will have a massive impact, hopefully, when they'll choose to follow Christ.
We have the opportunity, and hopefully it is just simply our response, to choose to react to things that are happening in our world and in our, smaller environments in a different way than the rest of the world might respond to those things. And I think that is that speaks a lot to people who are around us, because it makes you question, why did this person react this way? Why are they not freaking out like everybody else, or being unkind to this person who seems like they deserve for everybody to speak illy of them?
Mhm.
I think that is the biggest testament, because on the other side of that, one of the things you hear people say all the time, cannot tell you how many times in my life I've heard it, people who don't believe say, Christians are just a bunch of hypocrites. They say one thing and they do the other, and that tends to speak really loudly to people. So I think the opposite of that.
What kind of things do you think specifically they're looking for?
To hear the things that come out of people's mouths. So if we're preaching love and kindness and forgiveness and mercy and grace, but all you hear coming out of their mouth later on is trash talking other people, well, then who are you giving that love and grace and mercy to? Is it just for some people, or is it for everybody?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's one of the biggest ones.
Just negativity in general, being major, I guess, either pessimist or
The whole world's going to hell in a handbasket.
yeah, joining together and rallying against various groups in hatred instead of, in a condemning way, whether it's in large groups or just people around you because of how they live their life, basically condemning them instead of offering them hope and sharing compassion and love. I think those are areas where Christians can fall short and turn, well, you're not turning non-believers away, but giving them a reason to not be interested in what you believe.
What do you think outside? So what are some of the worst offenses we can commit that turn unbelievers off? What are some of the worst things we can do?
Well, Cheryl said one big one, that's hypocrisy.
Yeah, and just slandering people in general, I think.
You think those are the worst?
They seem to have a really big effect on people.
So when you like gossip,
Uh-huh.
you think that is okay?
I do, because it doesn't come in, it does no good for us when it's coming out of our mouths.
Mm-hmm.
It does no good for the person who's hearing it, and it certainly doesn't do any good for the person that you're talking about. no good comes from it in any
Right.
direction.
I think lying is a very damaging one too,
Mhm.
because anybody can pick up on that. And every person, whether they believe in Christ or not, or know anything about Christianity, knows that that's not good.
You know, one of the things he lists here is respecting authority.
Mm.
And what is it?
Well, you see a lot of that not happening too.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's interesting because we kind of try to nuance it at times. Well, if they did this, I would respect them. You know, and I have one grandson in particular. He can get on a kick about respect, and I'm like, respect is your choice. It's not really about the other person.
Mhm.
Like, should people earn respect? The answer to that is yes. But even if they don't earn it, how you treat them says more about you than it does about them.
Mm-hmm.
And the place that, in my opinion, that I think the church, the evangelical church in particular, has struggled with the last number of years, but especially the last 6-8 years, is politics. We talk straight trash about one another. I mean, like, you know, I mean, every candidate is flawed.
Mm-hmm.
Some candidates are more flawed than others. Every leader is flawed, and some leaders are more flawed than others. But what we say out of our mouth, and what the argument I would get back from some people is that I don't break the law. You know, I'm just expressing my opinion because they, you know, they're ungodly, or they've done this, or they act in this way. But he tells us to honor them. You know, in this passage in Romans 13, I believe it's the other passage, giving honor is not about whether I broke a law or not. It's just like honoring your spouse. You know, it's not about whether they did right or wrong. The honor that's your responsibility. It's not theirs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I don't. Yeah, I don't mind waiting out here. Every, for example, president, because they're the easy target, has issues. And frankly, I haven't been a fan of the last several that we've had. Forget what party they were from. I just haven't been that big of a fan. But they earn the right to be where they are. And whether we like it or not, they're there by God's design.
That's what I was going to say. We had this whole discussion at Bible study last week because it came up in our study, the general idea. And you know, when you were saying that they require your respect, well, then it's also us admitting, okay, God allowed this person to be put in this position for a reason, whether we understand it or not. And so that respect is also toward God to say, well, not to say to him, well, I could have done better. I would have made a different
Right.
decision. We don't trust the person that you have decided to put in this position.
And God, there are multiple places in the New Testament where it says they're there because of God's assignment.
Yeah.
You know that, and you don't have to like it. They may do things that go completely against what God would have chosen, but they're there on God's assignment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and either God's in control or he's not in control. There's no middle ground. He's in control except when people vote. No, he's still in control, right?
Do you think that there are some that are there by assignment, and then there are some that are there because God allowed people's choices, basically saying, if you're going to choose this, I'm going to allow you to experience what it's like? Do you think there's both?
So that was kind of true with Saul, right?
Yeah, like King Saul.
But he was still anointed.
Mm-hmm.
He still had the Holy Spirit.
Oh, yeah.
It was, you know, I mean, you can't take that away. And had he done what God wanted him to do, he would have stayed king.
Right.
That's the thing about it. Trying to determine what God appoints and what God allows is beyond my pay grade.
Oh yeah, I'm just asking if
And
you think that they both.
I think the same is true of pretty much everything in life. You know, some people, for example, I know some people who believe they've married their soulmate when in reality it was never what God wanted, but He allowed it.
Mhm.
You know,
Right.
but you know, so I think here's what I would say: if God did not want it, it would not happen.
Right.
That's the bottom line. If He said, "No, I don't want this," but we don't get our way over God. Period. Right? We don't get our way over God. If God wanted to stop you from committing adultery, He could do that. He may allow it, but you don't do it because He can't stop you. You do it because He allows you to do it. That's the thing. And sometimes we over exaggerate that and say, oh, ultimately, God either made it happen or allowed it to happen. At no time did we override God or overwhelm God or keep God. You follow what I'm saying? Because if He wanted to do it, He would do it. Like if I had a gun and I wanted to shoot Sheryl, He could stop me. And to say God can't stop me means I'm God and He's not.
Right. Yeah.
He could stop me if He wanted to. Now He may allow it to happen. That's a different animal. But saying God couldn't, we got our way and God couldn't do anything about it is just a myth. You know.
Okay.
So that's I just don't know that. Do I think God allows some things? The answer to that is yes. That are against what He wants.
So that's the battle with free will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so what I was saying, I think, in my opinion, the most damaging thing happening to the church, or at least maybe not right this minute, but I can't see anything. I can't think of something that would supersede it. Is the political divide in the way we act over politics. We have acted foolish over politics in recent years and lost our witness and our testimony over it.
Yeah, because I think ultimately the point he's making is you are a representation of Christ.
Right.
So if this is what people are seeing as His representation, if that's what you're proclaiming, then you're hurting more than yourself. You're hurting the person who's seeing it.
That's right.
And you're hurting their opinion of God because, ultimately they should be able to look toward Him as a result of you.
Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us tomorrow as we continue our conversation around 1 Peter.